welcome to the debate. When astrophysicists look at a supermassive star, they actually observe this really profound duality.
Oh, definitely. It's fascinating.
Right? On one hand, that star is like the ultimate engine of creation. I mean, its immense gravity pulls in all this scattered dust and gas.
It ignites fusion.
Exactly. It creates light, heat, and, organizes chaotic matter into the very heavy elements that make life possible in its surrounding solar system.
Right, but there is always a physical limit to that process. I mean, if that star accumulates too much mass, its gravity just becomes overwhelming.
It stops illuminating the system.
Exactly, it stops illuminating. It starts warping the very fabric of space and time around it. And, well, it eventually collapses into a black hole, a localized point of infinite density from which nothing, not even light, can escape.
Severely that no new stars can ever form in its vicinity.
And that duality, I think, perfectly frames the economic and systemic threshold we are staring at today when we look at extreme concentrations of capital.
It really does.
We are diving into a deeply complex question today. Are billionaires market-venerated wealth creators who drive our society forward, or are they modern oligarchs who actively distort our democratic systems?
It's the central tension of our modern economy.
It is. And I take the position that billionaires are fundamental engines of innovation whose massive wealth is a reward for superior market foresight and for providing unparalleled value to everyday consumers.
And I take the position that billionaires act as architects of oligarchy, leveraging their extreme wealth concentration to stifle competition, rewrite the rules of the market, and ultimately subvert our democratic processes.
To begin, I think we have to look at the sheer mechanics of global progress. We often hear this popular narrative that billionaires are simply hoarders of capital.
Like dragons on a pile of gold.
Exactly. The dragon analogy. But that fundamentally misreads how wealth at that scale actually operates. Progress, especially at the absolute edge of human capability, requires an astonishing amount of risk.
Sure, risk is involved.
But not just a little risk. Entrepreneurs who reach this level of wealth do so because they are willing to risk massive amounts of capital to build revolutionary products that, frankly, risk-averse committees simply wouldn't fund.
But we have to look beyond just the initial idea, right?
Well, beyond that initial spark of innovation, they build infrastructure. When a visionary scales a company into a massive global enterprise, they employ millions of workers directly.
True, they do hire people.
But it doesn't stop at their own payroll, They establish complex, sprawling supply chains. Think about like a new semiconductor manufacturing plant.
The economic footprint is large, yeah.
It's massive. The sheer gravity of that enterprise supports countless small businesses, from logistics providers moving the raw materials to the local diners feeding the construction crews. The wealth they accumulate is not taken from a finite pie.
You're saying they expand the pie?
Exactly. They expand it for everyone. It is the natural market-driven reward for organizing capital and human ingenuity into systems that elevate the global standard of living.
Framing this extreme wealth as a mere byproduct of innovation ignores the systemic flaws it creates and, well, perpetuates. We have to look at how that pie is actually sliced.
Okay, how is it sliced?
Yes, the pie expands, but extreme wealth concentration leaves everyday workers entirely behind, while the wealth at the very top compounds exponentially, often doubling in just a matter of years. You might look at your own paycheck and wonder why it hasn't budged.
But wages have grown in certain sectors, barely keeping up with inflation, if at all.
We see a reality where productivity has absolutely soared, but everyday workers are left with stagnant wages. The gap between CEO pay and average worker compensation has widened to unprecedented, astronomical levels.
But the capital they hold isn't just sitting in a vault.
No, it's not sitting in a vault. It is frequently weaponized. It is used to buy out rivals, build impenetrable moats, and frankly kill innovation before it can ever challenge their monopoly power.
I wouldn't call it weaponized.
I would. When we look at this level of wealth, we are not looking at a perfectly efficient meritocracy. We are looking at a system where the accumulation of capital inherently creates a massive barrier to entry for everyone else.
A barrier or just a high standard?
A structural barrier. It cements a modern oligarchy, where a handful of individuals hold disproportionate power over the livelihoods of billions.
Let's Let's dig into the mechanics of that innovation argument, because I think the historical record provides us with highly specific proof of leaps that simply would not exist without extreme concentrations of risk capital.
I'm listening.
Look at the aerospace industry. For decades, legacy aerospace contractors and federal agencies were just trapped in this cycle of cost-plus contracts, literally throwing away rockets after a single use. It was wildly inefficient.
Public agencies have different constraints, though.
Right, but then a billionaire risked personal capital to completely revolutionize the field with SpaceX. Why couldn't a government agency do it? Because public agencies can't stomach the optics of blowing up 10 rockets in a row to figure out how to land one vertically.
So it required private risk capital.
Exactly. Concentrated private risk capital. Or, look at the acceleration of artificial intelligence through OpenAI. To train these massive language models, you need compute.
Which means massive infrastructure.
Yes, building literal warehouses filled with highly specialized, incredibly expensive microchips that draw municipal levels of power. You need billions of dollars before you even have a product to sell. I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective.
Go ahead.
These are not examples of a broken system. The massive market profits these individuals reap simply prove that consumers value these revolutionary goods and services. The market is voting with its dollars, signaling that this capital was deployed efficiently.
But we have to look at what happens immediately after that initial innovation phase. I come at it from a different way. Let's say we grant that the initial spark required a risk capital.
Okay, thank you.
The problem is what that enterprise turns into. These supposed innovators very quickly become monopolies. The data shows us quite clearly that monopoly power is often used to buy out rivals.
Acquisitions are just part of business, though.
But tech giants, founded by these same billionaires, frequently absorb smaller competitors in a strategy known as catch and kill. And the mechanism here is crucial to understand.
Are they really killing the ideas?
Yes! They aren't absorbing these startups because they want to integrate their brilliant ideas. They are absorbing them because they are terrified of them.
Terrified seems like a strong word.
It's the reality. If a startup develops a technology that could disrupt the billionaire's core business model, the billionaire simply uses their massive capital advantage to acquire the threat and shut it down. That isn't market efficiency.
But
It's a defensive maneuver that is using extreme wealth to build a moat so wide that no true competition can ever cross it. It warps the space around them so no new stars can form.
wait, let me stop you there, because I think a lot of people listening might be wondering, if an acquisition integrates a great idea into a global system, why is that inherently bad?
Because the idea gets buried?
Not always. Let's analyze the mechanics of that integration. A brilliant startup might have a fantastic software protocol, but they lack the massive server infrastructure, the international legal teams, and the distribution network to actually deliver it to the world.
Sure, they lack scale.
Exactly. If these large enterprises have established the extensive supply chains we talked about earlier, is the absorption of a competitor truly killing innovation? Or is it just the natural signaling of market efficiency?
I'd argue it's stifling competition.
But by integrating smaller ideas into established platforms, these enterprises actually scale that innovation to the public. The startup founder gets rewarded for their ingenuity, the technology reaches 3 billion users instead of 3,000, and the market becomes more efficient. The idea is actualized on a global scale.
That assumes that technology actually reaches the public, which often it doesn't. It goes straight into a corporate vault to protect the legacy product.
Sometimes, but not always.
But even if we grant your premise that scaling an idea to billions of people requires the massive infrastructure of a giant enterprise, we have to look at the reality of that scale.
Okay, let's look at it.
Building infrastructure requires roads, electrical grids, educated workers, and stable legal systems, all of which are funded by the public through taxes.
Right, public goods.
Yes. So, if we are going to celebrate the scale these billionaires achieve, we have to look at how they are or aren't paying for the public foundation that makes their scale possible. This brings us directly to how these individuals and their enterprises extract value from the very society that supports them.
Extract? I would argue they heavily subsidize it.
Subsidize? How so?
If we are looking at the economic footprint of these enterprises, the sheer volume of their corporate activities and high net worth spending drives significant tax revenue to fund public infrastructure.
Corporate taxes are notoriously low, though.
But between the corporate taxes they do pay, the payroll taxes generated by their millions of well-compensated employees, and the consumer tax revenue driven by their ecosystems they create, their economic footprint is what keeps the lights on for our municipalities.
That's the workers paying those taxes, not the billionaires.
Furthermore, look at where their private fortunes go. They seed massive global philanthropic initiatives. We are talking about private foundations stepping in with unparalleled efficiency to tackle the eradication of diseases like polio and malaria.
Right, philanthropy.
It's massive. They are funding massive climate change initiatives and providing billion-dollar endowments to research universities. This is capital being deployed for the public good with an agility and efficiency that a bureaucratic, politically gridlocked government agency simply cannot match.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. That philanthropy is largely a brilliant public relations distraction from systematic tax evasion.
Tax evasion is a crime. You mean avoidance?
Let's explain how extreme wealth actually shields itself. You talk about them paying taxes, but the wealthiest individuals don't earn a traditional salary. Their wealth is tied up in stock.
Which represents ownership.
Right, and they utilize a highly sophisticated yet perfectly legal mechanism often called buy, borrow, die.
Ah, the wealth management strategy.
Exactly. Let's say you have $10 billion in stock. If you sell it to buy a yacht or a mansion, you pay capital gains tax. So you don't sell it.
You hold the asset.
You hold it. Instead, you go to a bank and take out a massive low-interest loan using your stock as collateral. Loans are not considered taxable income, so you get hundreds of millions of dollars in cash to fund a lavish lifestyle completely tax-free.
But they have to pay the loan back eventually.
When you die, the cost basis of those assets resets, and the tax liability vanishes. They leverage complex offshore structures and these borrowing loopholes to pay lower effective tax rates than the middle-class workers in their own warehouses.
But that's legal avoidance, not evasion.
So yes, they might donate a fraction of their wealth to a foundation, which, by the way, they usually retain control over. But they are simultaneously starving the public infrastructure of the tax revenue it is rightfully owed. The everyday workers are the ones actually carrying the tax burden of the society.
I disagree that they're starving the system.
The billionaires' philanthropy is a choice, heavily subsidized by the public because of the taxes they avoid. It is an undemocratic allocation of resources.
But I think you're conflating tax avoidance, which is entirely legal and intentionally structured by the government to incentivize investment, with tax evasion, which is illegal.
The effect on the public treasury is the same.
But the intent is different. The rules of the tax code are purposefully designed to encourage capital deployment. The government actually wants founders to keep their wealth tied up in their companies rather than cashing out.
Because they lobbied for those rules?
When they reinvest their capital, they aren't taxed on it because that capital is out in the real world, building physical factories, funding research and development, and creating jobs. The system is working exactly as designed to maximize economic growth.
Designed by whom, though?
And regarding the philanthropic allocation, whether you view it as undemocratic or not, it is undeniably effective. Eradicating a disease or funding a breakthrough in carbon capture isn't a PR stunt. It's a monumental achievement for humanity that requires the massive, concentrated scale of wealth that only these individuals possess.
It becomes deeply undemocratic precisely when we look at who dictates the rules of that very tax code you just praised. You say the system is working as designed. My question is, who designed it?
Lawmakers do.
And this takes us to the ultimate question of systemic power and control. Billionaires do not just passively exist within a democratic system. They act as modern oligarchs. They utilize massive lobbying budgets to actively shape the laws in favor of the ultra-rich.
Lobbying is a part of the political process for everyone. Unions lobby too.
Not at the scale. For a billionaire spending $50 million lobbying Congress to secure a tax loophole that saves them $1 billion is just a phenomenal return on investment. They use immense campaign donations to secure disproportionate access to lawmakers.
Well, campaign finance is a separate issue.
It's the same issue. When you have enough concentrated wealth to single-handedly fund a politician's entire career through super PACs, you are no longer just a constituent. You are an owner.
Furthermore, we see them increasingly buying major news outlets and social media platforms.
To run them as businesses.
No, they grant themselves narrative control, shaping public opinion to protect their legislative and economic interests. This isn't just an economic issue about who has more money anymore. It is the active subversion of the democratic process.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. Let's critically examine the acquisition of media and social platforms.
Okay.
If market profits are the ultimate signal of efficiency, isn't owning a social platform or a news outlet simply another product that consumers vote on with their time and attention?
Information isn't just a product. It's the foundation of democracy.
But we often treat narrative control as if it's this, hypnotic beam that billionaires can just force onto a helpless public. A social platform only has power if millions of people voluntarily log onto it every single day.
True, but they shape the algorithms.
And a news outlet only has influence if people find its reporting credible and choose to read it. I have to challenge the premise. Is narrative control even possible if consumers didn't inherently value the platform being provided?
But if they own the platform,
If a billionaire buys a massive social network and completely ruins the user experience to push a personal political agenda, the market will simply abandon it for a competitor. We've seen it happen. The consumer retains the ultimate democratic power in a free market, their attention.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered that when monopoly power shapes the very laws of a democracy, the market is no longer a free choice?
How is it not a free choice? People can log off.
It becomes a distorted system entirely designed to protect the ultra-rich. You say consumers can just seamlessly go to a competitor. But as we discussed earlier with the catch-and-kill strategy, billionaires use their overwhelming wealth to buy out and shut down those viable competitors.
There are always new competitors popping up, though.
Not if you own the dominant public square and you spent millions lobbying lawmakers to deregulate your specific monopoly, and you've used offshore structures to avoid paying the taxes that could potentially fund a public alternative. The consumer's choice is an absolute illusion.
I think illusion is a bit hyperbolic.
The record is clear on this. Campaign donations and lobbying budgets give them a seat at the table that no regular citizen has. They aren't just selling a product. They are writing the regulatory framework that governs how that product is sold, who gets to legally sell it, and what alternatives are allowed to exist. That is the textbook definition of an oligarchy.
But to call it an oligarchy implies a static, dynastic control that completely ignores the massive volatility and dynamism at the very top of the economy.
Volatility for whom?
For the billionaires themselves. The individuals at the top of the global wealth lists today are largely not the same individuals who were there 30 years ago. Why? Because new technology disrupted them.
They still belong to the same ultra-elite class, though.
But the lobbying and the political donations, while certainly a reality of how our political system currently operates, have fundamentally not been able to stop the relentless march of technological innovation.
Because they just buy the new technology.
Not always. A legacy automaker can spend tens of millions of dollars lobbying to protect the internal combustion engine, but if an ambitious billionaire risks capital to build a fundamentally better mass-market electric vehicle, the consumer shifts their preference, the market adapts, and the wealth shifts entirely.
That's a very specific example.
But it proves the point. The system remains incredibly dynamic. The capital is a tool of acceleration, not just preservation.
It is dynamic for the billionaires, perhaps, but it is incredibly static for the workers at the bottom.
Workers benefit from new technologies too.
The dynamism you're describing is just a high-stakes game of musical chairs among the ultra-elite. It doesn't matter to the warehouse worker which billionaire is currently number one on the list, when their own wages haven't kept up with inflation for a decade.
But they have jobs because of those enterprises.
The economic reality is that extreme wealth concentration exacerbates inequality at a structural level. That isn't dynamism, that is extraction. When the rules of the game, the tax codes, the antitrust enforcements that are supposed to break up monopolies, the labor laws that govern unionization, are influenced heavily by the lobbying budgets of the ultra-rich, the fact that a new billionaire occasionally unseats an old billionaire doesn't change the underlying reality.
So you don't see any value in the exponential gains.
The working class is effectively disenfranchised from the exponential economic gains produced by their own labor.
Well, in summarizing my position, I stand by the view that without the risk capital of these wealth creators, we would inherently lack the revolutionary technologies that define the modern era.
Even at the cost of democracy.
I don't believe it's at the cost of democracy. We would lack the massive globally integrated enterprises that create millions of jobs, establish vital infrastructure, and push the boundaries of human capability in aerospace, medicine, and computing.
Those boundaries could be pushed collectively.
But they haven't been, historically. And we would lack the targeted, highly efficient philanthropic solutions that are currently taking on generational challenges. The wealth they accumulate is the market's mechanism for rewarding unparalleled foresight, assuming massive risk, and creating tangible value for billions of people.
And my position remains that allowing such extreme wealth concentration inherently creates a class of modern oligarchs.
A point we fundamentally disagree on.
Acquisition of media and relentless political lobbying.
Right.
The cost of their technological leaps is a deeply distorted democratic system that fundamentally fails the average worker and replaces the voice of the constituent with the wallet of the billionaire.
Well, I think where we do find a point of convergence is the undeniable reality that massive wealth fundamentally alters the global landscape.
Yes, absolutely.
The sheer gravity of this capital reshapes everything it touches, from the physical infrastructure of our cities to the digital infrastructure of our public discourse.
We completely agree that the impact is profound and world-altering. Our substantive disagreement remains entirely on whether that massive alteration represents a venerated market success that elevates humanity or a severe, systemic democratic distortion that endangers it.
And that is a tension that demands continuous, critical scrutiny, examining both the extraordinary technological leaps and the stark systemic inequalities driven by billionaires is essential for understanding the mechanics of our modern economy.
It really is.
There is much more to explore regarding exactly how this unprecedented concentration of wealth interacts with the daily fabric of our society.
It's a complex dynamic that requires us to look past the surface of both the slick PR campaigns and the overly simple condemnations.
Precisely. Returning to our supermassive star, it is up to all of us, as participants in this economy, to determine if the incredible light and heat it provides are worth the gravitational distortion it places on our entire system.
Or if we are already passing the event horizon.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us.